All right, we are live. We are with Lindsay today. She is the CEO of BadgePass, a newly published author, host of the Badge Banter podcast, marketing wizard, might I add, and an all-around just powerhouse of a person. Lindsay, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for that introduction, Luke. I like it. I'm just going to take you everywhere I go, and you can do my intro from now on.
There we go. Let's make it happen. So yeah, we're super happy to have you on, and I'd like to start first with the book.
Sure.
The book, I just finished it. I finished it in 2 sittings. It was a great read. And frankly, like it was inspiring for me to hear the stories of the book and how you going from beverage cart girl to CEO of BadgePass. It was an awesome story. So take me to the moment when you realized I'm going to write a book.
So I don't know. I don't even know if there's like an exact moment, but I read a lot. I think I'm at like 87 books this year to date right now. So I love to read and like to write too. And I always used to joke that I would write a book one day. And then going into this year, when I was working on like my strategy and plans of what I wanted to do this year, I was like, this could be the year. I really feel like I would like to write a book. And in the spring, I was going to kind of dive into it, and I tried, and I was going to do something that was like a little more industry focused, and it just didn't feel right. Like it didn't feel like me, and it didn't feel like BadgePass, and it felt like I couldn't get excited about it. And so I was like, all right, if I was going to write a book, like what would get me excited, and what do I feel like people like would resonate with people? And so the idea for Badge Passion kind of came from, I think, especially now, it's hard to get a vibe for like someone's authentic self. That's true about people. And I think that's true about companies. And when I think about BadgePass and what it's like to do business with us, and like me, and what it's like to work with me and be one of our partners or customers or whatever, once you work with us, you kind of know. And I think you could probably speak to that. But until then, you're kind of like, who are these people? And I kind of wanted to just get some of those stories on paper and try to share that as much as I could. And I felt like a book would be a good way of kind of representing me and the company and kind of what we're all about, without being like stuffy or formal. And I wanted it to be kind of representative of us and our culture and vibe.
Well, I think you accomplished that, because obviously we've worked with you guys for a while, and I felt like the book was a great just sneak peek into BadgePass as a company as a whole. So one of the first stories of the book was actually you duct taping your car door mirror back onto the car. Uh-huh. So could you tell our audience, and when I say our audience, it's like my sister, my mom, and my wife probably listening. So if you could tell that story, that'd be great.
Sure. So this story in particular seems to have really resonated with the people who've read it so far, because it's always the first one they bring up. Okay. But when I moved from New York to Mississippi, on my drive down here, and keep in mind, I was 22 at the time, when I decided to come work for BadgePass. This is like my first big girl job. And I moved across country and didn't know anybody. And we're literally 30, 45 minutes into the drive. It's a 17-hour drive from Buffalo, New York to Jackson, Mississippi. And a Canadian goose just decides that my side view mirror is its next target, and takes off from the median, sideswipes the vehicle. Very dramatic, I would add. Like, I don't think that any amount of writing or retelling the story could do justice to the high-pitched scream that came from me at that moment. And it just completely shattered my side view mirror. It was like smashed down against the side of the vehicle. And I'm like, oh my God, we have 16 plus hours to go here, and I can't see out of my side view mirror. Not to mention my car is like loaded to the top, so I couldn't see out of my rear view mirror. I was like, this is brutal. And so several hours later, we stopped for gas, and there was duct tape by the checkout. And I was like, I can make this work. And so the mirror itself was very cracked once I got it back up, but I duct taped it to the side of my vehicle and made the rest of the drive. And then I spent that weekend like unpacking and getting my life together. I mean, in a whole new state. And I showed up for work on Monday, and the CEO like was in the parking lot, and he saw me pull in, and he's like, what's up with your mirror? And I told him the story, and he's like, so you just duct taped it back on? And I'm like, yeah, that felt like a good way to solve the problem. And he's like, I think you'll fit in fine here. So I
That's
felt like it was a
awesome.
good story to kind of set the tone for like BadgePass and the people here. And also, I think that story kind of resonates with one of our core values, which is scrappy, which I talk about a lot in the book. And so that was kind of a scrappy 22-year-old Lindsay trying to make a move.
It's pretty scrappy for sure. Was it hot pink duct tape? That's what I want to know.
It wasn't, but man, it would have been better if it was.
I felt
Way
like that
more
would
on
have been
brand
such
for
a
me.
Lindsay, on brand Lindsay thing. Yeah, I actually have a Canadian Goose story. I'm probably going to butcher it, but I was at the zoo. I was a kid. So actually I heard this story from my mom, and I'm eating this peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I'm probably 4 years old. And I was probably playing with my sandwich, and next thing you know, this Canadian Goose comes up and starts eating it and takes it away from me. And my mom runs up to the goose and kicks it as hard as she possibly can. And she said it felt like she was kicking a bowling ball. Like it didn't do anything to the goose. So anyways, I do not like those birds.
Canadian
Not a big fan.
geese are no joke. No joke.
They're mean.
Mm-hmm.
It probably tried to take out your car door mirror.
That's what I'm saying. It was
to spite you.
It was vengeful. I feel that way.
Vengeful. So you come into the BadgePass organization. You're already scrappy, right? Hence the duct tape mirror story. And that is a value that you talk about in the book. Is, hey, we have this attitude of figure it the F out is one of the words you use in the book. And scrappy is kind of the politically correct way to say that as a value.
Yep.
But just this figure it out mentality, like, let's figure this thing out. Did you grow up into this? Is this part of your person? Like, how did you develop this as a value?
Scrappiness. Well, I mean, to be fair, at 22, it could have just been because I was like broke and just
survival.
So it was out of pure necessity. I had no choice. But I think that, so, I mean, my mom was a business owner, and she owned a security integrator business. And I think she just always instilled this, like, that was, to me, was more work ethic than scrappiness, which I think they kind of go hand in hand. This just kind of like get it all done at all costs. Like just find a way to make stuff work mentality. I kind of just feel like I got that from her. And I think that comes with, owning a small business and just trying to figure out how to make it in the security industry, especially when you're not like one of the big dogs.
Yeah, for sure. I want to share a quote from the book and just ask you to expand a little bit on it because it resonated with me. So here's what you say. After all, if you're always aiming for perfection, it's almost impossible to get started. Just start somewhere. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. So for me, I feel like I have conversations with people all the time. Like, I'd love to write a book. How did you do that? Or I'd love to start a podcast. How'd you do that? Or I'd really love for us to do this. But I'm just waiting for this to happen. Or I don't want to do it until this happens. And I think that it's easy to make excuses, especially when you look at, I mean, it's 2024. So like everything's perfection online. So you look at everybody's perfectly polished podcasts or everybody, really outstanding social media accounts or whoever's just killing it on LinkedIn. And you're like, man, I can never be like that. So therefore I'll just not do it. And I think that gets in a lot of people's minds and it keeps people from just like trying something. And so in the book, I referenced Lindsay's Lessons, which was like the original before podcasts were cool and before videos were cool, and which is hard to imagine now because I don't feel like I'm that old, but I guess I am. So, like 13 plus years ago, there just wasn't a lot of this. There wasn't a lot of video content in the world. And I thought people just wanted snippets of information in a more digestible form. And so we like hodgepodge this whiteboard together and like video setup. And I mean, to be fair, there wasn't even as good of equipment as there is now to accomplish those kinds of things. And we just made it work. And they were rough. Like I still look back on them and I mean, you can find them. They're still on YouTube. Like we haven't deleted them because honestly, they're just there for nostalgia now.
I will find them.
You can find them, Lindsay's Lessons. But people to this day will sometimes be like, man, those Lindsay's Lessons were really cool. Or I was a guest on a podcast, the Security Today podcast with Bear, and he brought up that he had found them as a locksmith some video I did on like the Schlage PIM device for wireless locks. And he's like, you're that Lindsay. And so I think that the message is really more about like, if we wait to start like this podcast, like what you're doing here, if you waited until it was perfect and you knew exactly what you're going to ask everybody and who all your guests were going to be and how you're going to market it and exactly what the vibe would be that it would take on, you might not start it. But if you just start it, at least you get it off the ground. Like, how bad can it be?
Right. No one's dying.
It's better than nothing, too. I mean, like anything you put out is better than nothing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's some famous quote by some famous guy. I think it's Winston Churchill, but I'm not sure. Where he says, perfection is the enemy of progress. Uh-huh. And that's so true. Like and I think you make a great point about we live in a world where everything is so perfectly curated online. And so we know we're imperfect as people, but for some reason we think our content or the things we put out into the world has to be perfect. And it's like, wait a second. If we just look in the mirror, we know like we're imperfect people. We're going to create imperfect things. But getting started allows you to learn, right? This is our first podcast. I'm sure there's going to be 100 things that I look back on this thing. I'm like, why did I say that? Why did I tell that stupid Canadian geese duck story? I should have just let Lindsay tell her story. Like there's going to be so many things that we learn, but if you don't start, you never get to benefit from learning. And you guys know for us as a small company, it's like, we feel like we're building the plane as we fly it a lot. And the teams just we're pivoting, we're adjusting things like, all right, we got to fix the wing out here. It's really, but if you have the flexibility and the adaptability to say, you know what, we don't have it all figured out, but we're going to learn as we go. Yep. It's also fun, Yeah.
And it's so fun to look back on. I mean, oh my God, we have some really fun, like reminiscent marketing sessions sometimes where we'll bust out like old logos or throwback things that we did, or we'll find photos from old trade shows and we're like, remember when we thought this was cool? And we're like, oh my God, how far we've come. And so, but I mean, you put yourself out there and you try stuff. And I think also just putting yourself out there gets people talking, and you want that. Hopefully they're talking more in a positive way than negative. Yeah. But for the most part, like people want to see what other people have to say, and like they want to hear different opinions, and they don't necessarily care if it's perfect. I don't care if other people's content is perfect when I see it.
Yeah. And I think in some ways it actually makes you feel more approachable when it's not perfect. So
it's definitely more
benefits
authentic.
There. Yeah. Okay. I want to shift gear. Well, not really shift gears, but I want to ask the next question that I have on my list over here, which is the power of one. You talk about this in the book. It was a really, it was a great story to illustrate that principle, where you had a customer, they had went to a competitor, and then things didn't work out. And so they flipped back to BadgePass, and you had something like days to get the system up and running. And it was just a story of the team coming together as one to solve this problem. All the way down from like executive leadership to or up from executive leadership down to like the support staff and everything. So, and everybody, when I think about it, everybody wants that culture, right? If you're a business owner or a business leader, you want a team that unites to accomplish great things. If you're a team member, and you want to work for a company that has this, that you care about enough to rally around, challenging things. So how have you created this culture of one? How have you created that at BadgePass?
Yeah, so I think we've been super fortunate. I mean, we just have some unbelievable humans on the team, and I think that matters. It goes both ways. It comes from the company, but you also create the culture at your company that you work for. And people who think that they don't have an impact on the culture of the company they're at, like watch somebody toxic get introduced and how fast that can change the culture. So the right humans can create almost any type of culture. And to me, we just always had this, like, you never say that's not my job. It's just not a thing here. When I started here, there were handfuls of us. We were a much smaller organization. It was 15 years ago. And I'm lucky that some of the people were about to celebrate the 30th anniversary of one of those team members who helped train me. And he's actually in the book. He taught the training class in the first chapter that I attended. And so like we have a lot of long-term people who have that same mentality and have kind of brought it along. And then when we hire new people, that new generation doesn't necessarily come with that. Hey, that's not my job. They do say that more. But we kind of have always instilled, like, if you don't say it, then no one else will say it to you either. And it's proven true because the people who are here, like, it's all hands on deck. I mean, that story I used in the book was a good example. We had graphic designer in the back packing boxes and like helping get stuff out the door and people testing printers. And that was for a very specific case. But I mean, if we've got a trade show and like something came in late and stuff's got to get out the door, like I'll see those sales and marketing teams scrambling and support chipping in, and the operations department being like, how can we make this happen for you? Do you need us to run to the store and grab something extra? Like, there's never this question of like, oh, that's their problem. Like, that's that department's issue. It's more like, okay, as a team, how can we help fix this problem? Or as a person, like, how can I assist you? And I think that the more you just think about your team as like humans, the more you realize we all kind of impact that culture together. And we just should take better care of each other.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like everybody's taking ownership of the problem.
Yeah.
Which is important. Yeah. And so have you, I mean, in the book, you talk about how you go on some trips together and you, I think during COVID, or after COVID, you had some big trip with the team. Like, how do you, is that part of instilling that type of culture of like, hey, we're a team, we're one? Do you talk about it a lot with the team? What are some of the ways that you foster that?
I think we do try to constantly reinstill our core values and what they mean to us and highlight examples of people who represent them. And we have like an internal tool that we use where people give thanks to other team members who've done stuff or gone out of their way or represented a core value in some way. Monthly, we give out something that's called the GOAT Award, the greatest of all time. It's also a goat wearing aviators, and it is next level. And that's usually representative of somebody who's embodying our core values in some way, and we'll share stories about stuff that happened that month. But we try to, as a team, I mean, it's harder, I think, and I think it's really hard for big organizations sometimes to picture like, well, how do I create this when my team is all spread out? And as we've gotten bigger, I can see it as team members are remote and you're more spread out. And like, how do you create that connectedness where people really feel like they're still part of the team, even if they're not, in this office walking around and bumping into me in the kitchen, getting coffee in the morning. And so I think that the more fun you can make it is important. And I think there's lots of good examples of like trying to have fun things. We try to have engaging monthly company meetings, but I mean, like, it's a monthly company meeting, so it's still a meeting. But we try to do fun things and lunches and bring everybody in once a year from all over the country for our kickstart and kind of like kick the year off with a bang where we do fun things. And so trying to keep that fun mentality and make it inclusive of your remote people is not easy. I think you have to be more intentional about it than you used to have to. You would take it back when you didn't have all those remote team members and when people didn't have offices spread out as much. I think you could just happenstance, like bump into someone in the hallway and build a connection with them. And now I think we have to be more intentional in trying to build that and foster that culture.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's something we're starting to think about with, because we have office spaces that people can work out of, but a lot of our folks, they want to work some at home and some at the office. And so we're trying to think through, okay, culture is super important here. How do we continue to have connection as a team, even if people are working remotely? So cool. I like that. In one of the chapters, you talk about some of the challenges of being like a mom and a professional and a very successful professional. And you say this: sometimes the best thing we can do for ourselves and our families is to recognize when to say no. I think as humans, we know we need to say no more often. I mean, I've noticed this as I've gotten more responsibilities, as I've gotten married and had kids and, more responsibilities at my job. So I think we all know we need to do that. But I think the difficult thing is trying to figure out, what do I say no to? So do you have a framework for that? How do you think through, like, what do I actually say no to?
No, it's a super good question. I think it is hard. And it's also, it has like an opposing viewpoint to one of the other things that I talk about a lot, which is like encouraging young people, especially early in their careers, to say yes to a lot of things. Yeah. Because I think it gives you more exposure to things and helps you figure out like where you fit in and proves, brings you additional value within a new organization that you're a part of. So at some point you have to find the balance. Like if you say yes to everything, then your word means nothing. Like then you're just a yes man and you'll just do anything. But to me, it's more about, especially from a working mom perspective, trying not to stretch yourself too thin. And at the end of the day, like we're all stretched thin in one way or another. And I mean, I travel a lot and I am away from the kids when they've got activities going on. I've got a 2-year-old, an 8-year-old. I'm running a business. Like these are all things that everybody's dealing with. But then that just means that I can't say yes to like every PTO request that comes in from my child's school. So instead of saying yes to like one, I'll just say no to all of them. And then I just donate money. Like I will donate my time to coming in and being the class reader, like something that's like really intimate and like has a lot of value, but it's less valuable for me to donate 2 hours of my time to going and like decorating for some event in their classroom that they're having. Like, unfortunately, I got to draw the line somewhere. So I can't, there will be some things like that, or like maybe I'll try to attend one field trip or something like that. But I can't be at everything. It's not possible. There has to be another mom who isn't on the road as much as me, who can be at more things. And so I just got to believe that balance works out. But I watch a lot of moms, especially, and I do think that this is like a mom guilt thing. Not that dads don't experience this. So I'm not by any means downplaying this. But I think that we try to like overextend ourselves. And this goes back to that like perfection. Like everybody's doing all the things with their kids and like all the things with parties and trips and all the time. And you can't say yes to everything. So if it isn't going to bring like additional value to me or my business in some way, then I probably won't say yes to it. If it isn't going to bring any value to like my children or my husband, help our family in some positive way, then I probably won't say yes to it. And I still have like some very close friendships that I will make time for, go meet up for drinks or grab dinner or a movie or something once in a while, but I will not say yes to like every social event with everybody. And it's not because I don't like people. I'm very social. It's because like I need to spend my time somewhere and I can't spend it everywhere.
Yeah, it is. It's hard to tell people you're not a priority right now. Like that's really hard to say that, but I think, at some point you have to guard those things that are most valuable, right? Which is, your family, your relationship with your kids, and, BadgePass, of course. My wife and I, we read a book, it's by Patrick Lencioni, and you might have read it. He's written books about like 5 dysfunctions of a team, and there's another one, Death by Meetings, I think he wrote. But he wrote a book called 3 Questions for a Frantic Family. And highly recommend it. His main point is your family, kind of his famous line in the book is their family was frantic. And he turns to his wife, and I actually can't believe he said this to her, but he said, if he's a consultant, he's like, if the businesses that I work with ran the way our family does, they'd all be bankrupt. And his wife was like, I cannot believe you just said that to me. And, I would be the same way if I was in her shoes. But that kind of woke them up to, we need to figure this problem out. Like we're running around frantically in our family. And what they came to is, in business, right? We set out goals. What's the big, you could probably say what the big goal for BadgePass this year? What are the top 3 things you guys want to accomplish? In our families, a lot of times we don't do that. And so he recommends having a rallying cry is what he calls it. You can call it a goal, whatever you want to call it. But he says rallying cry. And it's that thing that you can rally around as a family. So like for us, we were potty training our 2.5-year-old. I'm like, okay, this is the rallying cry for the next 3 months. We got to get this kid potty trained. So it helped us at least figure out together, get on the same page. What's the most important thing for our family right now? And then it allowed us to say no. There were certain things we had to say no to because like, he needs to be at home because we're in potty training boot camp right now. And it gave us language to help other people understand why we were saying no to different social things. So
I really like that example too. I have not read the book, or heard of the rallying cry, but I do enjoy that. But I like that example that you chose of potty training because for me, I think that stuff is also seasonal. And like, I try to remind my team members of this a lot. Like, I'm like, this is just a season. So like sometimes an employee will be going through something and like, you can tell, and like, this is a season for them. So like, let's get through this and then let's see where we're at on the other side of it. And I can vividly remember the season of me transitioning into the CEO role and us not having reliable childcare and having a newborn that was a terror, quite frankly, and didn't sleep and was just brutal. And that was like a very difficult season for our family. And I remember someone waking me up to it and being like, this is just a time, like this will pass. And now when I reflect on it, I'm like, you could like be in that season and feel like I have to say no to everything. Like I feel like I'm drowning, whatever. But if you just if you say like, oh, it's just a time, we'll get through this. And you prioritize how you're going to get out of it. I mean, then you can maybe say yes to going to an event because you're not potty training and you don't have to get on the toilet every 5 minutes. And so you
Absolutely.
can get out of it on the other side for sure.
Yeah. And the tough part of that is remembering in the past that this was a season, right? Getting the perspective to zoom out and be like, okay, that was only a couple months, right? This thing that I'm going through is only going to be a couple months, whatever time period you think.
Yep.
And trying to hold on to that. So yeah. You mentioned being, a CEO, and in the book you talk about you were beverage cart girl,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get a job at BadgePass as the channel manager, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then sales, marketing, eventually executive vice president of sales, and then CEO. So tell me about that transition and maybe what some of the most challenging things were when it came to taking on that CEO role.
So I think I was really fortunate. I mean, not everybody ends up at CEO of the company that they go to work for straight out of college. Okay. So this is an unusual circumstance. And I was fortunate to be at a place that afforded me a lot of opportunity for that and for growth. I think one of the challenges along the way, and still one of the challenges that I think team members here sometimes experience, is like there's no roadmap to what success is like. So if you go work for, like an accounting firm or something like that, and you're interviewing fresh out of college, they're like, here's how this is going to work. So you're going to start at this title. And then 6 months later, you pass this and you move into this, and then you move up, and you can kind of like see the steps up the food chain, if you will, to what your future career could be like there. But when you come work for a small business like BadgePass or other companies like that, the company won't even look the same a few years from now as it did a few years previously. And so there's no way to say, here's where you'll be, because I can't predict that. And I just knew that if I worked hard and was passionate about it and believed in it, like I could keep having the opportunities to move up. And that worked out for me, of course. And that was true. And I've seen that repeat itself with other team members. But I think that that's a challenge for people, is to kind of see what the future looks like, especially younger people. It was always a challenge for me here. I just had like faith, like I just believed it would work out. And luckily it did.
And was there anything in particular where you get this CEO role and you say, man, I really need to grow in this area? Or like, because you take on a whole new set of responsibilities in that role. Mm-hmm. Were there any areas for growth for you were like, man, this is something I need to work on as a professional?
Oh, absolutely. So I think one of my biggest things is I like to verbally process stuff. So if I have an idea or like I think something might be cool, I like to talk about it, brainstorm on it. I may say an idea and then 4 minutes later, I've completely moved on from it. It's dead to me. It's like it never happened. That's part of my brainstorming process. And I really have had to rein that in as much as possible, because it's one thing when you're just like a member of the executive team to just verbally spitball ideas. And it's another to say it, because then people are like, wait a minute. Did she want me to do something with that? Or was she just suggesting an idea? Like, am I supposed to take this ball and run with it? Or was there never a ball to begin with? And so now I'm much more intentional about saying like, this is going to be a brainstorming session and we're all going to say some random stuff, or no, this is a real thing that we need to run with. And so being clear in my communication there and setting expectations, I think was something I really had to learn to do better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've run into that a little bit too, where it's like, okay, yeah, because I like to ideate and like think about ideas, but sometimes they're really bad.
Yes,
like, there's only that's part of the fun, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm with you, but that is not okay. So part of this is like we also use a personality profiling tool, where you kind of understand how people process ideas and think about things, and like how they look at the world and like what impacts their personality has on decision making and that kind of thing. And that is not fun for everyone. So like what we just talked about and loving the brainstorm, and like other people can be in that, and their personality would be like, oh my God, that's 20 ideas that they just said. Like, do I have to do all of these? Like, how am I going to fit this in? What's my team going to think? They're going through all like the what could go wrongs. And I'm over here like, but what could go right? And then I'll say like all these terrible ideas until I get to one that's good. And like, I've just learned that that is not everybody. So being aware of it and knowing there's a time and a place for it and where to kind of rein that in has been helpful.
Absolutely. You know, you can't know you for 5 minutes and not see that you're passionate. Like, I mean, I think that's one of the things I love about you. I'm sure that's one of the things that other people love about you and working with you. And, you know, what do you say to young people? I say, Lindsay, I also want to find a career that I'm passionate about. I want to find something I'm passionate about. How do they actually get there?
Yeah. Man, I wish there was like an easy answer to it, because I could sell like millions of books on how to do that if I knew the complete answer.
Yeah.
But I think that sometimes you got to trust your gut. And so finding something you're passionate about, like nobody would have told me that it would be like badges in the badging industry. Okay. Like if you had told me that when I was 18, I would have been like, you've lost your mind. And it's hard to imagine that you would be that passionate about something, or like people who are in access control, like you'd be that excited to talk about door locks all the time. Like that can't be that intriguing. But a lot of that passion comes from like being a part of something bigger than yourself. So like for me at BadgePass, like the passion isn't necessarily the tangible item that we're producing. Like it isn't the physical plastic card, or it's not the way we help someone open a door. It's the solution that we provide, and like helping provide security, and the types of organizations we get to help, and the fact that I can see what the future of the company looks like, and like giving people a place to like call home from a work perspective, and like building a product that's really cool and makes an impact in how organizations function. That's what I'm passionate about, not like the tangible item. And I think for young people, sometimes it's hard to separate yourself from like the item that you're producing or what your company does, and step back and think bigger picture, because a lot of times when you're fresh out of college, like you're not thinking about a big picture, you're doing a job. And so that would be one of the biggest challenges. And then also there's this encouragement of younger people to job hop. And I get that there's benefits to that sometimes, but I think that along the way you can lose the time that it sometimes takes to like really get ingrained in a company and the culture, and like get a feel and like hit your stride. And so if you're every 18 months going and finding something new, like, man, after 18 months, you're just figuring out what this industry is. And so I would say, don't wait forever. Like, because if you get a vibe that the company is not for you, like you don't need to stay there for 15 years. Like that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But finding some balance between like, oh, I'm just going to move on and try something new, and being patient and like really settling into a company.
And I would add to that. I think you build your passion. I think there's a working component of passion where a lot of times people define it like find your passion. It's this like ethereal thing that you somehow got to grab out of the sky, and you wake up one day, you're like, oh yeah, I am passionate about pickleball or whatever the thing may be. And I think there's an action that needs to happen that will lead you to finding something you're passionate about. I mean, I think about our company. We capture quality ID photos. Like we allow students to submit selfies. I'm not passionate about that product per se, right? But as I've grown up in this company as a professional, and as we're building a team, and you know, we're doing things like as a culture that I'm really passionate about. It's like, okay, there's been work there, there's been time there, and I've seen myself grow in my passion, you know, for the product for sure, but also the thing that we're building as a team. So I think, that's the only thing I would add is just like there's an aspect to building
You're
passion.
Absolutely right. And this is why I think it's an important distinction. I tell people that I love what I do. That's different than doing what you love. So this like notion that you should go do what you love, like I love to drink wine. Okay. But I do not think it would be a productive use of my time or life to just drink wine all the time. And I get that there's like sommeliers out there in the world, and that's a great life choice for them. But I would argue that sommeliers might not love to drink wine as much as me, as they seem to spit it out a lot more than I do. So I'm just saying this concept of like, do what you love is, I think, misguided. And I think that figuring out how to love what you do and like find passion in that, it could be, I mean, you could work in customer service and you love helping customers. Like, it doesn't matter what industry you're doing that in necessarily. Like, if you love solving customer problems, like, find that passion, have an opportunity to do that wherever you land.
Yeah. Yeah. And following your skill set too. I think finding that, where does your skill set intersect with what you're, you know, what you like, that's a really good spot to be in as well, because then, you know, you're making more money, you're being more valuable to the company. Yeah, exactly.
Don't give me a job where I have to use an Excel spreadsheet all day. I'll lose it. I'll be gone in 2 days. But other 100%. People love that.
Yeah, that goes back to your earlier point about like, some people love ideas, other people don't as much. And that was actually a big realization for me, where I'm like, oh, everybody's not like me. Like, duh, obviously. Some people love the, you know, turning the crank, the daily grind of data entry. Not me. I would jump off a bridge before I had to do that for the rest of my life.
So. Some people would rather die than do this, like talk on a podcast like this. So
yeah. Well, it is a little out of my comfort zone, but it's one of those things. You just, you know, try it. You mentioned your love for wine. There's a part in the book where you talk about opening, you wanted to have a direct line of communication with everybody in the company. And you call it Wine with Lindsay, or Coffee with Lindsay. Yeah. I loved that you made yourself accessible like that to the company. I think that is awesome. What are some of the, I don't know, unexpected things that came from those conversations? Like, what surprised you about
so many things? I was really surprised at how many, there was a lot of people who I would consider, you know, like more reserved, introverted. They're the ones who aren't the first to come up to me at a company-wide meeting and hug me. They're not the sales team, is what I'm saying. Non-sales people. And a lot of them were the first ones to sign up. And I thought that would be like, they would not want to do it, but it was almost like it gave them an outlet to talk to me, where it didn't feel like a social thing, or there was no pressure. It was just one-on-one. They could ask questions in their format. And some of them came super prepared. I was surprised at how many people would come to those sessions with like, so what's the vision for this in 3 years? And like, very,
let's go,
like, extreme questions. And then other ones, I mean, I had an opportunity to just like learn about people's families, or like what's going on with their new house renovation and stuff, that especially our remote employees, where you might not just bump into them and they're like, oh, I'm in the process of moving. Like, you don't hear about it necessarily from somebody who lives in, you know, Florida. And this way you kind of have that avenue to talk on a more personal level, answer any questions they have, and just kind of get to know the team. So it was fun. You should do it too.
Yeah, actually, there's quite a few things in the book where I'm like, I want to start to implement that. I don't think I can do Wine with Luke. It's going to have to be like something else. But yeah, I love that principle of figuring, like, giving people access so that they can come anytime. We kind of do that, but I think having a formal process is a really good idea.
Well, Tyler on our team does tacos with Tyler, with his team.
Tacos with Tyler. I like that.
Yeah. Just to give
my last name's Rettstatt, so we could riff on the R. What would the R, you know? But no, that's cool. I wanted to ask you, you know, like we've been talking about the book the whole time. If you had to narrow it down to like, what's your favorite chapter? Like, if you could only keep one chapter in the book.
It's impossible. There has to be more than one chapter. So some of them I really enjoy. Some of them aren't necessarily chapters, but concepts. Like FitFo is one of my favorite concepts that I think came out of the book. Strongly debated whether or not it should stay in there. And then I just felt like it was too BadgePass and Lindsay to come out.
Yeah, it's on your door frame in the sales pit.
Correct.
It's gotta be in there.
I know. The goose story, I almost pulled. And ironically, I've had a conversation about that with anybody that's read the book. My daughter would say that the best chapter is the one about when I had her. She's read it like 17 times. There's a copy in our kitchen and she's like, Mom, I reread the chapter. And did you know that you said this? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, in fairness, it's not written completely from exact memory, but yes, I said something similar to that. And so I obviously couldn't pull that one out because she would be devastated. But I don't know, it would be hard to, there's a couple things that didn't make it into it, but for me, it needed to be a mix of personal and work stuff because I just don't really know how to separate the two. I think you can find a balance, but I think that like work and life intermingle, especially when you really do love what you do. And so I had no good way to say, let's do all BadgePass stories and no personal stories. I'm like, BadgePass is my life. Like it's my whole career. So I'm too intimately tied into it.
Do you believe in work-life balance?
I don't know. I think it's a complicated phrase and I think it gets overused. I do believe in setting boundaries and trying to create some semblance of what work-life balance looks like for you. But there's weeks when, and seasons, or something's going on and I feel like I'm heavy on the work. And it could be like right now when I'm traveling a lot and I'm away from home and I'm in hotel rooms all the time and I miss something. Then I, feel like I'm in a work balance. And then other times things are slower and calmer and I'm getting to take family vacations and hang out with the kids and like play golf on the weekends or whatever. And then I feel like I'm in the family zone. I'm in that season. And I think it kind of ebbs and flows throughout the year and definitely throughout different phases of the company. And so I don't think that you get to just say like, this is work time, this is lifetime, but everyone gets to set their own boundaries. And I think as long as you're cognizant of, okay, if I'm in family mode, like I should try to be in family mode. I think that helps, but I don't know that I totally believe in a complete balance.
Yeah. And do you, like when you come home, is that, because you're physically moving from the office to your home, is that your cue to say, I'm in family mode now? Or how do you kind of,
I'm not awesome at that. I try. And I definitely try to put my phone away and like during nighttime and all this stuff like routines and dinner or whatever. But I mean, I get phone calls from team members and stuff after hours sometimes too. And I don't necessarily not answer them. Like if they're calling, they usually need something. And sometimes I will pick up work again after bedtime, depending on what's going on. So how do you balance that? Do you go and just like shut it off completely?
I ebb and flow. So I went through a stage, I got an Apple Watch and I was like, I'm going to leave my phone. Like when I get home, I'm going to leave my phone. I'm going to essentially lock it in a box. And if someone's got to get it, like, so that means I'm not getting notifications. Like I have most of my notifications turned down during that time of the day. But if someone wants to get a hold of me, I have my watch. They can call me, right? And I'd answer it that way.
Yeah.
So that's worked pretty well. I mean, like last night, put the kids in bed and then I wanted to finish reading your book, so it's kind of what kind of work, kind of not.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's seasonal, I think.
I think that's the best way to think of it. And unless you let it consume you, which I think is not healthy. And I mean, there's stuff I do to like really prioritize my life. Like I wrote about it in like the planning stuff. I'm very intentional about planning trips with my family. I'm very intentional about doing one-on-one things with my daughter. I'm intentional about usually trying to take her on at least one business trip a year and turning it into a personal trip. She's coming with me to Florida in a few weeks for that exact reason. I schedule at least 2 date nights a month with my husband.
Yeah.
I go out of my way, but I plan all that stuff too. So like, I don't
well,
think
if you don't, the work stuff will consume you.
Correct. It fills in all the gaps.
There's always more to do. Like, and I think that is a real difficulty and a real challenge in building something is like, man, there's always something that I could be doing. And if I'm not careful, I'm going to focus on that. I'm just going to get pulled in that direction. So I do have to set really clear boundaries around when I work and how many hours I'm working and those sorts of things.
Yeah, you just can't let it take over everything.
No, you can't. More important things. So I wanted to ask you about BadgePass for a little bit. What is most exciting right now, like at BadgePass? What's happening in the BadgePass world that you're most excited about?
Yeah. So a couple things. I think from an industry perspective, it's been an exciting year for us. I've really enjoyed the kind of the introduction. It's not really the introduction, but the heavy marketing of mobile credentials and the way that has opened up a conversation for everybody to kind of be talking about badge issuance. And so it's pretty much the coolest time. And this has to be cool for y'all too, for people to be talking about this at such a high level. But people are much more concerned with how we're going to issue and manage badges than we ever have been before. And when I say badges, I mean both physical credentials and mobile or virtual credentials. And so that's really cool. And we've had a great opportunity as a result of that to have a very active voice on the physical badge side. I also love talking about that. So that has been fun for me too. But we are about to launch our virtual badge application for our cloud product next week, actually. And so I'm really excited about going into 2025, kind of our story being not just the physical badge, but also, your virtual badge or your mobile credential, like what you want to do, and kind of just having the flexibility from a product perspective to give everybody both. And that's really my vision is I want to see the product be where we're, the badge issuance platform that everybody's really excited about using. And I think it's just an exciting time in the industry where people are talking about that a lot. So that's been fun.
Yeah. And I love what you've done to brand BadgePass as like, we're the badge people. Like, you want to talk about badges? We're the people, we are the experts, the thought leaders around badges, and seeing some of your speaking engagements and the way you've put yourself out there as the badge people. Like, I think that is brilliant. And you talk about, I also love that you have the nuanced approach of like, hey, there is a place for the virtual badge and the mobile credential in this new world that's coming. So how do you see that working out? How are those two going to work?
So I think that the virtual badge or the mobile credential should be a supplement to the physical badge. I think there's exceptions to that rule, and there's places where you don't need a visual ID, and that would be like, I don't need to wear a badge while I'm at a gym working out. Okay. So like a mobile credential could make sense there. I don't need it in my apartment complex. Like, I don't need to show you proof that I live there. I just need it to open a door or whatever it might be. So I think that those vertical use cases where the visual ID component isn't important, you won't see them be replaced. But to me, I love them as a supplement. I love them working in tandem together. I think that that's the vision that I see for it. Some combination of a physical badge to visually identify who's there and who should be there, and then combine that with the user experience of a mobile credential. Like, I forget my badge if I show up to work on Saturday and my badge is at my house and I was in my husband's car or whatever, and I need to grab something out of the office. Like, no big deal. I can use my phone. Some combination of both of those is like what I get really pumped about.
Yeah, I agree with that. And as we want to be the photo people, right? That's kind of our thing. Capture photos. What do you see as the photos place with the mobile credential and the badge? Obviously it's kind of already on the badge, but what do you see?
So when we designed our virtual badge application, it was important to us that the photo be part of it, because for that same reason, it should still be a visual identifier. And I think that you've lost a lot of that as people have been concerned about the wallet and the user experience. And that's fine, to be fair, because if it's in the wallet and I'm using it to open a door, I'm not going to walk around with my phone like this, hey, I'm Lindsay. Anyway, so again, this goes back to I think the two complement each other, but I think the photo's critical and super important. And that's why I think that I get excited about what y'all are doing. And I see it having a use in both the digital credential space, like a virtual badge. Think about parents, for example. This is a great example. I think a parent doesn't need a physical ID to be printed from a school to go pick up their kid or visit the school. But I think that if I'm a parent, I would 100% carry a virtual badge on my phone that would make my check-in process easier. But I think that should also have my photo on it, where someone can also do look at it. And
yeah, make sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So we designed our virtual badge application with the physical badge in mind, and keeping the elements that I think are meaningful from a visual identification perspective, but bringing them into kind of more of a digital platform.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, we're very happy you did that, because we could get some good photos for you on that virtual badge. Okay, we're coming up on the end of our time here. I have one more question. Okay. I want to know podcast recommendation, a movie recommendation, and then a book recommendation. You said you read 87 books this year. Is that what I heard?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of books.
It's a lot. I know.
I don't know how you read that much. That's crazy. But podcast recommendation, movie recommendation, book recommendation. Go.
Are you wanting a podcast that's industry specific or not?
It doesn't have to be. Whatever you're liking right now.
Okay. All right, let's see. There's a couple. I really like a podcast called Trading Secrets. I'm not a financial person, so that isn't like my strong suit. And I like the way that the host breaks it down into elementary level financials, and then helps like explain financial things in more detail. And a lot of times he'll have really good guests. Like one of my favorites was when he had the CEO of Raising Cane's on, and he talked about like how he raised, it was not very much money, but how he raised money to get the first one started, and how he owns all of that business, still is privately held, like 90% of it, and kind of how he grew it. And it's fascinating. So there's been some really good guests. Some of them are very pop culture-y, like Bachelor cast off and stuff like that. He was on The Bachelor too, so that's how he started this. But I think that the way it kind of blends like pop culture, there was like a TikTok star on there recently, and they talked about like the finances of how much they make as a social media influencer, like things that just blow your mind from a financial perspective. So that's one of my favorites right now. Not industry specific, but that's a cool one to check out.
I have to check it out. Yeah.
They're not all perfect. Some of them I'm like, skip this episode. But some of them, like the Raising Cane's one, if you're going to pick one, I would do that one first.
Okay.
That was probably a couple months ago. So that would be one of my favorite podcasts. Man, movie recommendation, like a recent one?
Yeah, recent.
Okay. So I have to say that I was really pumped this summer when Twisters came out, because I felt like it was the first time in several years that we had like that summer blockbuster feel good, like, like Armageddon days. When we were growing up, like we always had a summer blockbuster in July, and it was like this big movie, and it wasn't gonna win an award or anything, but like you left and you're like, what a good movie, what a good way to spend 2 hours. Like I talked about Twisters for like 2 weeks afterwards for that exact reason. It was like the nostalgia of summer movies. Did you see it?
I did not. I'm gonna have to add it to the list. I have a movie list that I just keep a running list of movies. That way, when we get, when my wife and I pull up Netflix and try and choose something, we're not like scrolling for hours. So yes. I'll add it to the list.
And then from a TV perspective, I would say almost anything that Apple TV Plus does, that has to be the best subscription service that's ever existed, because almost every show they put out is unbelievable. Right now I'm watching the Netflix series. Gosh, I can't remember the name of it. Which literally, I was just talking to my sister about how nobody could remember the name of this show. Nobody Wants This, I think it's called, and it's cute.
Okay.
But it's not. Again, it's not gonna change your life.
What about book?
Book. I'll give you one of my favorite business books, and he has several out. So I'm very fascinated by the Savannah Bananas, the baseball team. Are you familiar with them?
I feel like, did you post about them on LinkedIn?
A while ago, yes. And it won't impress me if I do it again, because I'm obsessed with them.
I think that's how I heard about them.
Okay, so I've never seen a game still. Just cry out for tickets here. Like, I cannot get them. It's impossible to get to a game. But it's basically a show. Okay, so they changed the concept of baseball and they turned it into like a marketing experience. And so the players sing and dance, and they changed the rule of baseball, and it's 2 hours max. And when you go get concessions, everything's included. And the concessions stand, people sing and dance, and like the players greet you in the parking lot and like shake hands with you and take pictures with you and do TikToks with you when you're leaving the game. Like, it's very interactive, immersive experience. Anyway, Jesse Cole is the CEO or like owner of the Savannah Bananas, and he has several books out, but one of them was something about like find your yellow tux. That's his thing. He wears like a yellow tux all the time. I can't remember the exact title, but it has something about yellow tux in it. And I read it on a plane, and you should have seen like my notebook. I had like all these marketing ideas that it just stemmed in my head. I was like, well, how can we make the customer experience like that? Or how can we create something that's immersive or make things more fun? And so that was a very inspiring one.
That's cool. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Well, now the problem is you'll read it and then you'll be like, now I have 800 ideas, and like, how do I choose which one I'm going to do?
How do I pick one? Yep. That's the difficulty, staying focused and taking one thing to completion. Well, Lindsay, thank you so much for your time today. I know you're busy. You got a business to run, but this was a great conversation, and I appreciate you making the time.
Thanks for having me. It was so fun. I always love chatting with you, Luke, but this was great. And this was fun because it's probably the first time anyone's asked me in a long time to chat about like the business as a whole and company culture and stuff outside of, badges, which I do love though.
Good. I know you do. You're very passionate about it. And I appreciate that about you.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again. And we'll see you around.
Thanks.